My name is Amanda Miller, and at the age of 28, I never thought that one day I would be at the center of a family quarrel. When my beloved grandmother Elena died last month after a long illness, I found out about it, and accidentally sent to me a message from my cousin that I was deliberately excluded from the opening of the will. Despite the queasy feeling in my stomach, I showed up anyway. "We have already divided everything," announced my Aunt Judith with a spiteful smile. "You were not invited for a good reason." But then the lawyer frowned. "But her name is the only one that is in the will." The room suddenly became dead. If you have ever felt excluded from your family, press the subscribe button and write to me in the comments from where you are watching. Family drama is everywhere, and I'll tell you now how mine escalated in a way that no one expected. Growing up as the daughter of Robert, the youngest son of my grandmother Eleanor, was not always easy. But my father made sure that I had a happy childhood. He was the family rebel who decided to become a teacher at a Hickschool rather than join the family investment company. My mother Samantha was a nurse, and they raised me with values where helping other people was more important than accumulating wealth. Every Sunday we visited grandmother Eleanor's magnificent Victorian house in the historic district of Boston. A beautiful relic that has been in the possession of our family for generations. But when I was 12, everything changed abruptly. My father died suddenly from an aneurysm, and my mother was struggling hard both emotionally and financially. Grandmother Elena did not hesitate for a second. "Amanda will partially live with me," she announced to the family, not allowing any contradiction. The next 6 years I spent alternately in my mother's modest apartment and in my grandmother's house. While my mother was working double shifts to keep us afloat, Grandmother Elena became my second caregiver. "You are like me, Amanda," she often said when we were sitting together in her garden. "You see people for who they really are, not for what they can give you." Her words shaped me more. When she ever guessed, Grandmother Elena was not the typical rich widow. She wore simple clothes, volunteered in soup kitchens, and silently donated to causes she believed in. Her big house was her only luxury, a home full of memories, not a mere display of wealth. My Uncle Philip and my Aunt Judith never understood their decisions. They lived in the suburbs in modern wills, drove expensive luxury cars, and constantly tried to push grandmother to live up to her status when I decided to follow in my mother's footsteps and become a nurse. Especially in hospice care, my relatives were at a loss. Uncle Philip introduced me to Thanksgiving when I was "Amanda, you could work in the family business. Why are you wasting your time on a job where you can hardly move up?" He waved his expensive bourbon and looked down at me. "Your grandmother could make a phone call, and your life would be settled." I just smiled and replied, "I want to go my own way." On Philip, my cousins Rachel and Nathan, both graduates renom Myrta business schools who now worked for their father, absolutely could not understand my decision. They were used to the fact that inheritance and relationships paved the way for them. Revenge once asked me quite seriously, "But don't you want to be rich?" The thought that something else could be more important to me than money was perfect for her. Strange, when grandmother reached her 80s, her health slowly began to decline. I started to visit her twice a week, brought shopping, helped her with the medication, and often just kept her company. We baked together according to her old recipes, exactly the ones she had taught me as a child. Her spice biscuits were legendary in the family, but I was the only one who knew that the secret ingredient was a pinch of black pepper. "You have flour on your nose again," she laughed then, and handed me a handkerchief. Although her body was weakening, her mind remained clear, and her humor quick-witted. During these visits, she told me stories from our family history that no one else was interested in. For example, her own grandmother had been one of the first female doctors in Massachusetts, or how the family fortune originally came from the invention of a special textile machine by her grandfather. It was stories of struggles, perseverance, and occasional setbacks that made our family more human than the perfect facade flaunted at holiday dinners. "Never forget, Amanda," she told me, "on an afternoon like this. Wealth alone does not make a person valuable. How someone treats someone else, if he thinks that he cannot win anything, this is the true standard of his character." Meanwhile, grandmother's health problems became more and more obvious. but the rest of the family could only be seen sporadically. Uncle Philip stopped by once a month, but spent more time checking the condition of the house than dealing with his mother. Aunt Judith brought expensive gifts that grandmother did not need at all, and disappeared again after exactly 1 hour. My cousins almost never came, unless there was just a big festive dinner. In December, just before grandmother died, she gave me a small wooden box. "This belonged to my mother," she said, and put it in my hands. There was a simple pearl necklace in it, nothing flashy or particularly valuable. "She is beautiful," I replied, sincerely touched. "I want you to get them now," she insisted. "The others see in it only pearls, but you understand that their true value lies in who wore them." I had no idea at the time that this little gift would be blamed on me later. The last conversation that I had with grandmother, just a week before her death, continues to resonate in my head to this day. It was one of her good days, and she was sitting upright in her favorite armchair by the window. When I was about to leave, she grabbed my hand surprisingly tightly. "Amanda, I've been watching all of you for years," she said in a clear, determined voice, looking straight into my eyes. "I want you to know, I see everything, and soon I will put things back on track." I thought at the time that she meant that she wanted to find inner peace before she left. I had no idea that she was planning something that would change all of our lives forever. The first big break in our family occurred 3 years earlier when grandmother was 85. Uncle Philip called for a family meeting at grandmother's house, ostensibly to discuss her care. When I arrived, not only the family was waiting for me, but also a real estate agent in the living room. "We decided to sell the house by the lake," Uncle Philip announced, referring to our cottage in New Hampshire, where grandmother had spent every summer since childhood. "It is empty almost all year round, and the maintenance costs are absurd." I glanced at the grandmother, whose facial expression remained deliberately neutral, but I knew her well enough to notice the tense line around her mouth. "Hurt? Did Grandma agree to that?" I asked. Uncle Philip waved dismissively. "Mother understands that it is the most reasonable decision. At her age, she doesn't have any of it anymore anyway." "Actually," I replied, "we talked about just last week that she would like to spend a few weeks there this summer." It became quiet in the room. Aunt Judith cleared her throat. "Amanda, love it. Maybe you misunderstood something. Mom knows her limits." Then Grandma spoke up. "That's exactly what I said to Amanda. I have no plans to sell my house by the lake." The real estate agent said an embarrassed goodbye. No sooner had she left than Uncle Philip turned his anger on me. "You always do that," he hissed. "You think you know what's best just because you're here more often. But you don't understand anything about the financial obligations." "I understand perfectly well," I calmly replied, "that grandmother should decide on her possessions on her own." That evening, after everyone else had left, Uncle Philip confronted me in the kitchen. "Listen carefully," he said in a low voice. "You may think you are special to her, but you overestimate your happiness. Do not forget who built the prosperity of this family, and your father definitely was not." The remark about my father hit me deeply. Nevertheless, I remained steadfast. "This isn't about money, Uncle Philip. It's about respecting grandmother's wishes." From that day on, Uncle Philip started something that I can only describe as a campaign against me. At first, it was subtle remarks to other family members about how I would manipulate grandmother, as well as hints that I would position myself for preferential treatment in the will. By Christmas of the same year, it became clear that many in the extended family had turned against me. At the festive dinner, Aunt Judith forgot about me at the family photo. Cousin Rachel made spiteful remarks about people speculating on inheritances while looking at me directly. Even my mother's sister, Aunt Grace, who had always been kind to me, was noticeably distant. After dinner, I happened to overhear a conversation between Uncle Philip and my cousin Nathan. "We need to protect Elena from Amanda's influence," he said quietly. "She completely wrapped it around her finger. Who knows what they will tell her to do with the fortune?" I tried to address these suspicions directly. I wrote emails to my aunts and uncles and explained to them explicitly that I had no interest in grandmother's money at all, but only wanted her to be able to spend her last years pleasantly and according to her ideas. The responses were lukewarm at best. Aunt Judith replied tersely, "We all want the best for Mother," while others did not react at all. At Easter the following year, the family met at Uncle Philip's house. I was not invited, and only found out about it through social media when Rachel posted photos of it. In one picture, grandmother was sitting in a corner, looking fragile and confused. The same evening I called her. "Did you like the Easter celebration?" I asked carefully. "It was nice," she said, and then lowered her voice. "But they hadn't made the stuffed eggs the way I like them, and it's always so cold at Philip's." "I wish I could have been there," I said quietly. A pause followed. "You weren't invited." The honest surprise in her voice confirmed my fears. She didn't know that I had been excluded. The more grandmother's health decreased, the more the family began to actively restrict my access to her. Aunt Judith introduced a schedule of visits, which allowed me only 2 hours on Sunday afternoon, ostensibly so as not to overwork Mother. But when I came to these visits, suddenly a cousin or an aunt often decided by chance to drop by as well, so that private conversations were impossible. I responded by finding creative ways to keep our connection going. On my days off from the hospice, I brought grandmother lunch that we enjoyed together. Maria, the home care worker who really cared about grandmother, sometimes secretly called me when she believed that grandmother needed company or had a particularly good day. On Christmas, the last feast before her death, I was not invited to the family celebration at all. Aunt Judith wrote me a short text message. "We are keeping the holidays small this year. Mother needs rest." It was only later that I learned from Maria that Klein meant that everyone was invited except me. So I brought a package to Mary on Christmas Eve. Grandmother's beloved spice biscuits, which we had always baked together in the old days. A soft cashmere shoulder scarf in her favorite color blue, and a photo album that I had put together with pictures from all the decades in the Sea House. When grandmother died in April, I did not learn the news from the family itself. Maria called me crying from grandmother's house. When I arrived, Uncle Philip and Aunt Judith were already there and were talking to a funeral director about the Burdig funeral arrangements. "Oh, Amanda," Aunt Judith greeted me with mock kindness. "Of course, we just wanted to notify you." The funeral became a demonstration of the power of the family. My seat was in the third row behind distant relatives who had seen grandmother maybe twice in the last 10 years. I was not asked to give a speech, although I had spent more time with her in recent years than anyone else. Uncle Philip gave a funeral speech, which mainly highlighted the business successes of grandmother's late husband and the family inheritance left by him. Meanwhile, I had to constantly think about what grandmother had said about getting things back on track. I had no idea how prophetic her words actually were. 2 weeks after the funeral, I was preparing dinner in my small apartment when my cell phone lit up with a text message. It was sent to a group by my cousin Rach, apparently by mistake, at Harrison's office tomorrow at 14 o'clock. "Mum tells Amanda not to say anything." I starred on the message and my stomach tightened. Second. Another text message followed later. "Sorry, wrong chat. Please ignore it." I sat down at the kitchen table while an icy feeling crawled through my body. So it would go. They wouldn't even let me know that the will had been read, no matter what Grandma left me. Apparently, they wanted to keep me completely in the dark. I was brooding all night, thinking about what I should do. A part of me wanted to respect her wishes and not put myself on this petty level. I never cared about grandmother's money. Our relationship was based on love, not inheritance. But another part of me, a stronger part, knew that grandmother would have wanted me to be there if nothing else deserved. I at least want to hear her last wishes, even if she had left me nothing. In the morning, I had made my decision. I called at work to report sick, something I did very rarely. Carefully, I chose my outfit. A simple dark blue dress that grandmother had always liked. Elegant, but not flashy. I wanted to appear respectful, and not like someone who absolutely needed money. While I was driving to the law firm in downtown Boston, my hands were shaking on the steering wheel. I was already rehearsing in my head what I could say and how I should face the inevitable confrontation. I stayed in the parking lot for a few minutes to gather my courage. "Stand up for yourself, Amanda." I heard grandmother's voice almost clearly. "You belong wherever I wanted you to be." The law firm of Harrison and Associates was located on the top floor of a venerable old building. When the elevator doors opened, I saw them immediately. Uncle Philip and Aunt Judith, my cousins Rachel and Nathan, Aunt Grace with her husband Tom, even the distant cousin Louie, who had barely spoken to grandmother. They were standing close together in the waiting area, talking in muffled voices. Aunt Judith noticed me first. Her expression froze in the middle of the sentence, and then quickly turned into a mask of disapproval. "A murder," she said aloud, so that all heads turned to me. "What are you doing here?" I slightly raised my chin. "I'm here because of grandmother's will." Aunt Philip immediately stepped forward and demonstratively placed himself between me and the group. "You weren't invited. This is for the family." "I belong to the family," I said simply. "You know exactly what he means," Rachel interjected. "A family that respected grandmother's wishes and did not try to influence her." Before I could answer, a door opened and an elderly gentleman with silver-gray hair and kind eyes appeared. "Is everyone here because of Elena Miller's estate?" he asked, noting the tense atmosphere. "Is there a problem?" Aunt Judith put on her most charming smile. "Mr. Harrison, there seems to be a misunderstanding here. Amanda wasn't supposed to be there today." Mr. Harrison looked confused. "Miss Amanda Miller, Eleanor's granddaughter?" "Yes, I am," I confirmed. He glanced at his clipboard. "Then you definitely belong to it. Please, everyone, come in." The conference room was elegant, but not pretentious, with a long mahogany table and comfortable leather armchairs. I sat down near the door and felt every single glance at me. The whisper was barely concealed. She must have found out about it somehow. Philip will be beside himself after the thing with the lake house. Mr. Harrison cleared his throat vigorously to restore calm. "Before we begin, I would like to mention that I was not only Eleanor's lawyer but also her boyfriend for over 30 years. She had very precise ideas and I planned to implement them exactly." He was about to reach for a file when Aunt Judith interrupted him. "Mr. Harrison, I think I should explain the situation with Amanda to you. She was not invited today because we have already discussed the distribution of most things. We didn't want to waste your time." I felt my face getting hot when everyone turned to me again. "We have already divided everything," my aunt announced with a final tone of voice. "You weren't invited for a good reason." Mr. Harrison frowned and seemed honestly surprised. "I'm afraid there's a serious misunderstanding here, Mrs. Carter. So far, nothing should have been distributed at all." Then he looked me straight in the eye. "And as for Miss Amanda Miller's exclusion," he opened the folder in front of him and squeezed his glasses. "Cope, that would be extremely unusual, especially given the content of the will." "What do you mean by that?" Uncle Philip demanded to know. Mr. Harrison raised his gaze. His facial expression remained professionally neutral, but there was something like enough in his eyes. "I mean that your name is the only one in the will." The room instantly became dead. It felt as if all the air had suddenly escaped, so that no one dared to even breathe. "That is impossible," Uncle Philip finally brought out with difficulty. "That must be a mistake, I assure you." "That's not it," replied Mr. Harrison in a voice that left no doubt that he was not a man who made mistakes. "Perhaps it would be best if I read the will as Elena wrote it." Mr. Harrison put on his reading glasses and started in a clear, firm voice. "I am Elena Kessrin Miller, in my right mind and in full possession of my mental powers. Hereby declare this to be my last will and testament and revoke all previous wills and codicils." The formal legal language continued for a moment before Mr. Harrison finally came to the crucial section. "After careful consideration and observation of my family over the past few years, I have made a decision regarding the division of my estate. I hereby bequeath all property, both real estate and movable property, including but not limited to my main house at 47 Bacon Hill Avenue, my vacation home at Lake Winnipegosi, as well as all financial accounts, investments, personal belongings, and family heirlooms of my granddaughter Amanda Rose Miller." A collective outcry followed. Rachel dropped her water glass, which splintered on the wooden floor. No one made any effort to pick up the pieces. "That can't be right," exclaimed Uncle Philip, whose face had by now assumed an alarming blush. Mr. Harrison continued unperturbed. "I have attached a personal letter explaining my decisions. This letter will be delivered privately to Mr. Harrison, Amanda." Nevertheless, I would like to emphasize that this decision was made with full awareness and careful consideration. He looked up from the document. There are more, but perhaps we should first clarify the immediate concerns. And Judith was crying now. Black mascara ran down her cheeks. After everything we've done for you. Doctor's appointments, family dinners maintain her prestige, although she constantly dealt with these charity people. Nathan leaned forward. We will challenge the will. She was obviously not sane. Mr. Harrison shook his head slightly. I would strongly advise against this step. Elena foresaw exactly this reaction and therefore took extensive precautions to document her mental sanity.